This is the Panasonic Lumix S5. It's the latest full-frame camera from Panasonic. And today, we're going to review it. So without further ado, let's roll that slideshow. So the Panasonic S5 weighs 1.57 pounds, including the battery and 2 SD cards, which is a massive size and weight reduction from the Panasonic S1 and especially the Panasonic S1H, which are both over 2.25 pounds. So when it comes down to it, you have the Panasonic S5 and you've got the 20 to 60 millimeter 3.5 to 5.6 variable aperture lens, and you've got a very light combination, which is a welcome reprieve from the rest of the camera bodies and especially the Pro lenses in this series. Now ergonomically it's very similar. As you can see here, I've got this grip on it. I mean, you can have 10, 15 pounds on this thing and you can still grip it really well. And it's a really fantastic camera for that. I actually have the 50 millimeter f1.4, and just like with the S1, I mean, it's a lot of lens to hold on to, but it's a great grip. And to me, ergonomics are a very underrated thing about cameras. Where everyone's talking about features and other things, I really need a good grip on a camera when you're out there shooting handheld, or regardless, it's really nice to have this kind of a grip on a camera. So that's one thing that I'm very glad that Panasonic did not change about this camera. So in regards to the size of this camera, there were a few compromises Panasonic had to make in order to make this camera possible. One of which is the inclusion of a mini HDMI port in lieu of a traditional full-size HDMI. It's a little bit less dependable just because the micro or mini HDMI cables tend to break a bit easier. You also have the removal of the top screen for photo information like ISO, f-stop, etc. That's been removed. That's on the S1 and the S1H as well. Another compromise was the batteries are different. So this, instead of having your traditional S1 or S1H batteries, this has the smaller GH5 battery, although this one has 4 additional pins in it, so you can't really use a GH5 or GH4 battery in this. However, vice versa, I'm told that it can work. So you could use a Panasonic S5 battery in a GH body. Now, this does not have the same battery lifespan as the S1 or S1H, not even the Sony a7 III, as we found out in the S5 versus a7 III shootout video. The battery life is just not that good, so you always need to take either an additional battery or you can use like an FX Line Nano 1 or Nano 2 portable battery. You can plug that into the USB-C port and you'll still be rocking and shooting. Now another change coming from the S1 and the S1H is that you have a Class 1 and Class 2 SD card slot options here. Now, from the S1H has 2 SD card slots, so that pretty much is similar, although you don't have the 2 Class 2 options. You have Class 1 and Class 2. Class 2, of course, being the stronger, more data-heavy one, where you can have those bigger codecs. And of course, the S1 has the XQD slot, which I miss personally. I know not everyone is on board with the XQD memory cards. Now, body aside, there really isn't anything wrong ergonomically with this camera. It's a really good camera. As mentioned before, I mean, the grip is right on par with the other cameras. It's a great camera to use. You've got plenty of custom buttons. Everything is more or less where it should be. There is the inclusion of the S and Q option, which is, you know, what Sony does as well, which is having sort of an option where you can select your slow motion and your frame rates. At first, I didn't like it because I felt like, why do you need that? Why can't you just have that internally in the video menu? But after using it, it is a bit easier to get to, and it's nice that you can kind of just do one click up from the creative movie mode and bam, you're at S and Q, and you can do slow motion or whatever you want. I wish there were just more options in terms of, you know, the frame rates and also The codecs leave a lot to be desired. I wish they were more data heavy. I wish there were better quality options. I know this is not an S1H, it's a less expensive version of the S1H, but I wish that you had those options there. Let's dive into the camera features themselves. I feel like we've done a pretty good job covering ergonomics, weight, everything else, but opening up the camera, you see there is a flippy screen. So this is a really nice inclusion, just like the GH5 and the S1H. Having this flippy screen is really helpful if you're vlogging. And the only issue that I have with it, there is a slight obstruction, although it's very, very slight. It's with the mic input cable here, where if you were to put a cable in front, as you can see, you're gonna have an issue, a little bit of blockage there, but it's very minor. It doesn't cover up a lot of the screen, so I'm just gathering that, you know, maybe that was the best they could do within the size limits. I want to jump right into autofocus because that's what everyone wants to talk about, right? Autofocus is always the big thing with Panasonic because you have such a feature-rich camera, and the S5 is no exception. Just like the S1, I mean, they're all really feature-heavy, but the autofocus leaves a lot to be desired. Now, when this camera was first released, Panasonic was over the moon with their announcement that they had fixed and enhanced the autofocus system on this camera. Now, being a Panasonic user for a while now, I've used Panasonic cameras, I've used Sony, I've used Canon, but Panasonic always has the issue with the autofocus. They are really just stubborn in regards to not changing over to the phase detect autofocus system. Perhaps they're victims of the sunk cost fallacy. So what is the verdict for the autofocus system on the S5? Well, I did an autofocus test by the water. I was able to test in 4K 24p and 4K 60p in Vlog and Cinelec D2, and you can see the test results for yourself. Now, after viewing the footage, I inferred the best autofocus settings on this camera are not too different than the other cameras, which is you want to be with an APS-C crop, although the AF-C mode, which is the one that Panasonic was heralding as this new improved autofocus system, they weren't entirely disingenuous with that statement because the AF-C is actually highly usable on this camera when you're filming with an APS-C crop. With the Panasonic S1, I never touched AF-C because I knew what to expect. I only use AFS. As a matter of fact, right now I'm filming this video on a Panasonic S1 in AFS using the APS-C crop mode. So the autofocus, as I'm seeing here, has me in a yellow box and I don't see any background pulsing. So, but getting back to the S5, the AF-C is really good in this camera. Just bear in mind, APS-C with that crop, it'll be a much better experience than filming full frame, which I know we buy full frame cameras to use full frame cameras. What is the purpose if you're using an APS-C crop with it? But at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision if you want to have really good autofocus or if you want to film in full frame. And if you want really good autofocus, you've got to use the APS-C crop. Otherwise, it's highly unpredictable. Now I'll show some footage I shot with the Sony a7 III shootout as well as the Catskills. I mean, it's a really great camera in terms of filming in 4K 60p, 420 10-bit, and filming in different modes as well, and it takes fantastic photos. It's got that very similar megapixel sensor, the 24 CMOS sensor, which is really, really great on this camera. It's the same on the S1 and the S1H. Although the S1H, I believe, has a low pass optical filter, I believe, that the S5 does not have, nor does the S1 for that matter, but it takes really great photographs, it takes really great video. The autofocus, as mentioned, the APS-C crop is the way to go with that. But aside from that, the features are really great. I haven't even really dipped that much into the photo features yet because I know there's the live view composite. The high resolution mode I used and I really liked it as well. It did a great job kind of capturing the details and it's just a fun overall like hybrid camera system to work with. So a couple of additional features about the S5 I want to go over. The IBIS is really good, not at the same level as the S1 or S1H, but really good. I actually have a video here showing walking on the beach, handheld, vis-a-vis, using the camera with IBIS on, and the IBIS is really nice on this camera. Not quite at that level as the S1H, I know, but given the size of the camera, my best guess is going to be that the size did play a factor into the IBIS not being as effective as it was on the S1 or S1H. As far as any additional comments, I would say the image quality is still really good. It's a lot faster feeling in terms of the navigation and getting to your modes than the S1. It's a great camera though in terms of just the size, the portability. The lens, by the way, I want to go over before I forget. The 20 to 60 millimeter f3.5 to 5.6 lens is a really nice lens to have. It doesn't replace my 16 to 35 f4 just because the optical quality just isn't there. However, the 20 to 60 millimeter lens has its own uses. It's light, it's portable, it's a great complement to the S5 camera, and if you buy it with the kit, you're basically paying $300 for this lens, and it's a really effective and great lens to have. I did notice there is some corner softness, so it's not, again, not quite at that level as the Pro lenses, although I will say that given the Pro lenses are generally quintuple the price of this lens, you know, that should stand to reason. So it's a good lens overall, great for vlogging. I've done a lot of vlogging with this lens on the beach, on the streets, and it was able to get me pretty well. So overall, I think the camera and lens combination is a very, it's a tight combination, and it makes sense why they would be paired together. Now, as far as any additional comments I have to make regarding the Panasonic S5, I will save those for future updates. Along with the firmware updates Panasonic is releasing, this is a review that will be constantly evolving along with those firmware updates that Panasonic is sending out. For instance, the Panasonic S5 is soon going to have the capability of doing 5.9K RAW through an external recorder, which is going to really substantially change the possibilities on this camera. In addition, it's receiving some S1H features as well. So this will be an ever-evolving review. So keep an eye out for that. And as always, thank you very much for watching.